Raising a child is one of the most rewarding experiences, but it can also be one of the most expensive. Not to give you any additional anxiety, but today we're gonna do a deep dive into the financial side of parenthood and talk about some of the surprising costs and smart ways to budget when you decide to have kids. If you're planning or already have, this video is a must watch. By the end of this video, you're gonna understand the key costs associated with raising a child from birth all the way through college, as well as practical strategies for managing these expenses in the best way possible. Proverbs 21:5 says, "The plan of the diligent leads surely to abundance, but everyone who is hasty comes only to poverty." All right, so before we dive into the specific details, let's look at the big picture. The total cost from raising a child from birth all the way to 18 can range from $123,000 all the way up to $603,000 on the high end. And that's not accounting for everything, right? I mean, if you take these multimillionaires that put the kids into boxing, ballet, art, whatever it happens to be, and it's 16 times a week, like, that's not what I'm accounting for here, but it is including, I would say, a childhood much more luxurious than the one I had, or potentially you had, right, watching. I grew up at a very small city in Brazil, and I'd be shocked if someone spent this much money raising someone. There's no way. Anyways, it only comes out to about $573 per month on the low end, or about $2,700 per month. If you divide that between, husband and wife, hopefully that's the case here, it's really not that expensive at all. Now, the general number can come off as daunting, but don't worry. Let's break them down. Let's discuss a lot of these strategies on how you can, put these into bite-sized pieces. It's not like you have a child and then you got to pay $500,000 to, deliver the baby. It's not the case. So let's talk prenatal and delivery costs. This video is not to discourage you to have kids. It's for you to understand what the costs are around it. I sincerely believe that the Lord has a specific blessing and providence for each period of our lives. And Dad, I'm assuming it's mostly dads watching this video. Here's my short note to you. You are not the sole provider of your household. God is. 1 kid, 2 kids, 3 kids, you may need a bus. Well, God still remains the sole provider. And he does that through us, giving us grace, but he's the provider. So, another thing for you to keep in mind is that, although he's giving you strength and grace to work, you can actually pray and ask for more entrepreneurial spirit, more creativity in your thinking and income generation. Read more books, subscribe to this channel. If you're not subscribed, that was a good plug. But that's what I mean. You don't have to be stuck in your current situation. And as your kid develops and becomes more expensive, then your income is not going to grow with it. It should. And at the end of this video, I'd like to pray with you together. If you are in that situation and you're feeling anxious, drop me a note. I'm happy to talk about this stuff and maybe even hook you up if that happens to be the case, right? If I have an open position or know someone who does, let's talk, man. Shoot me a DM on Instagram. I respond to just about everybody who reaches out, as long as they're not selling me any cryptocurrencies. The other thing to keep in mind is that most of us didn't actually have prenatals, right? In private schools, and I didn't get a car when I turned 18, and we all turned out just fine. So look at as this would be great. If not, well, move on. So prenatal care in the US, this includes maternity, prenatal visits, the tests, the procedures. It ranges anywhere from $2,000 to $3,500. However, this is just for the routine care. It doesn't include any complications or additional tests. That's just the prenatal part. Delivery, the cost of delivery are actually much higher than stated. And the reason for that, and I'll get into it in a little bit, because insurance covers a decent portion of it, or the hospital or the state does. But if you have a normal traditional delivery, the average cost is around $13,000, without insurance. A C-section, the average then is $22,000. And just because you're gonna have to essentially have the anesthesiologist come in and there's more people in the room, it's more complicated. But I will say this, I know some friends who just showed up to the hospital, had the baby, never paid a dime, without insurance, of course. Even with insurance, some of the out-of-pocket costs can actually be substantial. I remember when we had our first daughter, we showed up to the hospital, and after she was born, someone from the hospital came and they're like, "Hey, you need to pay this amount." I think it was $1,500, and it was very tight for me. I remember I had to move money around and then make that payment. I didn't know that was going to be a thing, that they were going to charge me on the spot like that. So just a heads up, that might be something you look into, hey, is the hospital going to charge me anything while I'm there? Or what happens if I say, hey, I don't have it, right? They're not going to turn down service and healthcare because you say you have no money. Now we go into postpartum care. With insurance, it comes out to an additional $2,800. For C-sections, the average out-of-pocket is a little bit more, roughly $3,200 with insurance. So the total cost from pregnancy, childbirth, and postpartum in the US typically is around $18,000. And this includes, insurance and out-of-pocket costs. But it's important to note that these costs are gonna vary a lot depending on the location, the type of delivery, complication, the age, the insurance coverage that you have, and obviously like the healthcare landscape in the US is extremely complex. It's always changing, and the costs are obviously gonna fluctuate over time. Now let's talk about the baby's first year. At this stage, your little one's beginning life, and there's a big focus on essentials, right? So diapers, formula, breastfeeding, supplies, baby furniture, healthcare. You're gonna spend a lot of money and time on checkups, vaccinations, baby-proofing your home. It's a magical time, full of first smiles, first steps, and the costs do add up a bit quickly here. Saving money and buying secondhand items, maybe even using like cloth, I don't use cloth diapers, I'm sorry. Prepare for the occasional medical emergency and choose childcare options very early on. We did have a couple of surprise visits to the hospital with my older daughter, middle of the night type of thing, and you're freaking out, right? Because as a parent, you have no idea what to do. So make sure as a dad, as a parent, you have your emergency fund. It's got to be a little higher now that you have a kid. So maybe add a couple more months of expenses in there. Just make sure you're keeping track of it. A quick reminder for you is Philippians 4:19, and it says, "And my God will supply every need according to his riches and glory in Christ Jesus." Trust in God's provision, but also be wise and practical when it comes to how you're spending your money to ensure that you're meeting your child's need without any additional financial stress. Let's talk a little bit about the cost. All right, so the estimated cost from pregnancy all the way until they turn 2 years old, you're looking at about, on the low end, $23,000, on the high end, $71,000. So it just, again, depends on how much you want to give, how much you want to provide, what the Lord has given you and you want to bless your kids with. Be cognizant of that. I personally think $71,000 is a little absurd, and you don't even have to come close to that. I did some research using Google Perplexity, and that was a legitimate figure. If you account for it, take a look at the chart, pause the screen, take a look at the chart, and if you add up all of those high-end costs, that's what the number comes out to. All right, so let's talk about the infant and toddler years. So starting with early childhood, which is typically ages 2 to 5, your kid's now pretty curious, constantly learning, probably starting preschool or daycare, which is gonna be very expensive, but it's critical for their development. We tried a couple times with our daughter, with Stella, and she didn't like it. She kept getting sick all the time, so we pulled her out and then we tried it again, and then it took a while for it to stick. When Stella was around 2, we could tell that she was getting pretty bored at home. We couldn't really burn off her energy, and she wanted not just physical, but I think mental growth and stimulation. And I mean, we tried a lot, but still, I think she needed to be around other kids for social development as well. So we put her in daycare. She kept getting sick or couldn't get used to it. Didn't cry or anything like that. She didn't like it, and then kept getting sick all the time. So she'd go to school 1 week and be sick for 2, 1 week sick for 2 or even 3 sometimes. So it took us a little bit to find the right daycare. Just keep that in mind. Make sure you're not signing a 1-year agreement with the daycare, because that may not work, right? On top of that, you're gonna have some food costs as they're growing and eating more solids. They're gonna need a lot of clothes at this age. I mean, literally from every couple months, you're gonna have to redo the whole closet. Healthcare, of course, which includes regular checkups, dental visits. It's a good stage at this point for them to start participating in team activities, structured activities, sports, music lessons, community programs, if you're budgeting properly. Don't forget, this is an exciting time when your child is starting to build their personality and interest. So you don't want to just stick them in whatever program. You want to find something that actually fits what they enjoy doing and try to make an effort to get them involved in that activity. So on the low end, as you see the chart on the screen, we're looking at about $30,000 for ages 2 to 5, and on the high end about $87,000, $86,000. If you add this all in, so from 0 all the way up to 5, you're looking at about $54K on the low end and $158 on the high end. Now remember, we're talking about $54,000 total for 5 years, so about $10,000 per year. Again, it's not that much money, right? I think people make it a bigger deal than it seems. It's really not that much money. I think anybody who is just getting a very low-key part-time job like Uber, DoorDash, whatever, you can easily pay for this. So never let this be an excuse on why you don't want to have kids. So let's talk about the school age, and this is ages 6 to 12. This is when school becomes a central focus, whether you're opting for public or private school or homeschooling. Education costs such as supplies, field trips, extracurricular activities, it's going to increase at this stage. Your child's also going to start playing some sort of sport at this point, learning an instrument, who knows. Healthcare here is going to get expanded, typically more dental care, maybe even braces, vision checks, potentially glasses, who knows. So keep in mind, your kid doesn't need to be in a D1 track and like on some sort of development program for that level of sports activity. They can do a ton of free stuff in the community. They can use or buy secondhand equipment. There is a lot of YMCA programs that offer some really good programs, team activities that they can participate in that are very inexpensive. Deuteronomy 6:6. These commandments that I give you today are to be on your hearts. Impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road, when you lie down and when you get up. Investing in your child's education and their well-being is one way to fulfill this biblical principle. Every time you're doing something with your kid, although it may have some sort of monetary aspect to it, economical aspect to it, there is a fundamental aspect to it, which is stated here in Deuteronomy 6, which is you need to be talking with your children continuously about the commandments. Impress them on your children when you're at home, when you're walking along the road, when you get up, when you go to sleep, etc. That's part of the process here, guys. So the reason I bring this up is because although this video is focused on the finances are secondary when it comes to raising a kid. So we're looking at anywhere from $4,300 here all the way up to $28,000 and bringing our cumulative total to between $84,000 and $354,000. And now we get into the beautiful teenage years. Teenage years bring a lot of new challenges and opportunities. And when we're talking about money here, they may need more supplies, more advanced schooling, better laptop, better tablet, and then the activities actually do get a lot more serious here because they begin to play a pretty critical role. Remember, when I'm from late elementary all the way up to high school, I played a lot of sports. And I mean, between the travel, being in band, played trombone, and played football in Texas growing up. And then in off season, we did basketball and then track. It was busy and I loved it. Like I loved every minute of it, but your kid might be going through something similar, right? There's a lot of, again, braces likely continue or start here. And given the way that our generation is, maybe even mental health services. Encourage your teen, at this case though, to take a part-time job, even if it's at your company. And this is gonna teach them a lot of responsibility and help them cover a lot of the cost. I'm not saying force your kid to work so they can pay rent. I'm saying use it as an opportunity to not only cover the expense, but teach them a critical responsibility, which is, hey, there's a value to money, go learn what it is. My first gig, I was like 14 years old. I worked at a grocery store in Texas. So I'd get off school and work, anywhere from 3 to 5 hours per day. It wasn't something insane. And then like a full-time day, a couple times during the weekend. It wasn't anything brutal. And I loved it because it allowed me to travel a lot when I was younger. So for this stage, we are looking at, on the low end, about $39,000, on the high end, $249,000. That's pretty much it, guys. So cumulative, we're looking at $123,000 all the way up to $603,000. And this is where kind of college comes in. I didn't actually include that in here because I think at that point, right, although it's a significant financial milestone, tuition and fees vary so much, living expenses, dorm fees, food plans, personal expenses, all of that adds up. Financial aid and scholarships obviously help offset the cost a lot. Starting a college fund, the 529 plan, helps a lot. Doing dual enrollment programs and choosing in-state versus out-of-state school, like this is all that a parent needs to sit down and talk with their kids about. My thought process is, even if I have the capacity to pay for my kids' entire tuition, I don't want to, because I think it's gonna jeopardize the experience for them. They're not gonna value it as much. So I do want them to continue working, fill out, as many scholarship opportunities as they can, potentially continue living at home, like we're not doing free rides. You know, Proverbs 22:6, train the child up in the way that he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. I think in this case, like preparing your kid not just for college, but while they're in college for adulthood is very important. And I've seen a lot of kids that the parent pays for everything and they end up getting lost along the way. I've seen parents who pay for parts, the kid works, pay for part, but they go to an out-of-state school and the kid ends up like changing their mindset towards the Lord. And I mean, honestly, between us, that's not really a risk I'm willing to take. So I'm preparing them for heaven, not for college or not for adulthood. For heaven is the mindset. I read a quote the other day that was like, the only thing you can take with you to heaven, if you play your cards right, I don't remember exactly what the quote said, but the only thing you can take with you into heaven, potentially, maybe, is your family, is your children. So, you know, that's the goal. Let's talk about some hidden costs that you might not expect. So a couple of them include emergency expenses, like I mentioned, medical urgencies, etc., school trip, lifestyle adjustments, like if you're moving because of a school district or a job or a larger home, opportunity costs, such as career breaks, potentially, if parents are shifting careers. That's all things that you need to consider and manage the cost. So establish a emergency saving fund early on. Consider flexible work arrangements too. Like, I don't know if you guys can look into working from home or be as flexible as possible, because if you can eliminate some of these expenditures like daycare, that saves you so much money. But anyways, so on the low end, we're looking at $123,800 divided by 216 months, which is actually not that much, right? That's how many months you have with your kid until they're 18 and potentially move out. That's only $573 per month. It's really not that bad. On the high end, you're looking at about $2,800 per month. And I mean, honestly, even at $2,800, divide that over, 18 years per month. I think two people can actually make that happen. And if they really want it, it's like very important for them, they can make it happen. I don't think making an additional $2,800 per month is like the end of the world, especially in the day and age that we live in, right? So anyways, guys, that is the whole video. By being aware of these costs and planning accordingly, my prayer for you is that you can better manage your finances and ensure that not only you and your family, but that you guys have a stable future and you're building a legacy. Scripture says that the wise man leaves an inheritance for his children's children. So remember to subscribe to the channel for more videos just like this one, and share your experience and tips in the comment below.